Right, now that is a discussion anxious to have this morning with our guests. And just before I remind you who our guests this morning are, I'd like us to check our Super Bowl and just talk about marijuana. Who are some of the petitioners that we've had in Kenya concerning the use and legalization of marijuana, the benefits, and of course, some of the countries that have also legalized the use of marijuana. Now, early this year, not even early this year, but last week, Kibra Member of Parliament, that is Ken Okoth, had several proposals. One, he was saying that there is need to decriminalize marijuana and, of course, grant amnesty to offenders, regulate its farming, establish research institutions. And, of course, this is not the first time that Kibra Member of Parliament is talking about the legalization of marijuana and its use in the country. In 2015, he proposed that the government should stop wasting money on sugarcane farming and legalization of marijuana. Now let's look at this proposal that he's already sent a letter to Speaker of National Assembly. He did that last week. So I'd like us to have a look at some of his proposals. Of course, as you can see, there are 4 of them. And he plans to introduce the Marijuana Control Bill 2018 and with a view to decriminalizing the growth and use of marijuana. And of course, the Kibra Member of Parliament also wants amnesty measures instituted for the removal of criminal records against citizens with prior conviction of marijuana use. Remember, the police have arrested so many people in connection with the use of marijuana. So Kibra Member of Parliament is saying that all those people who have been arrested because of using marijuana or in possession of marijuana should be set free. And of course, he noted that there is research and policy development on growth and use of marijuana and hemp for medical, industrial, textile, and recreational purposes. Somehow he seems to be agreeing with the petitioners that marijuana has health benefits in terms of it can be used for medical research. So Ken Okoth is among some of the people who have made that proposal. We also have Simon Morra, who's actually who's a scientist. Of course, this year in September, Mr. Morra, of course, also sent a petition to Parliament, and he wanted Parliament to actually legalize the use of marijuana. And just before I take you to our Twitter poll, just remind you of what we have for you this morning when it comes to the use of marijuana. Another petitioner was Okoth Gwanda, who presented his petition to the Senate Health Committee, saying that marijuana has not only huge medicinal benefits, but also massive industrial use. All right, so now, let's have a look at one story that made the headlines last week, and that is about the man who was arrested in Kiambu, and he was actually saying that he was directed by God to grow marijuana. And of course, the middle-aged man was arrested. Police in Kiambu arrested the middle-aged man for allegedly planting a bang on his farm. Now, the suspect, Njoroge Mbugwa from Gurubini Plains in Limuru, confessed that he has been farming the illegal plant for more than 2 years. And more interestingly, adding, it is Jesus who ordered him to venture into that type of farming. It took security officers several hours to uproot the bang, whose value could not be immediately established. Let's have a look at what he said.
Oh, kuna court over inasimamisha.
Namna gani?
Nyingine pia iko.
Hata ataletewa tu saa hii hapo.
Hata niguacha. Lakini Mungu ndiye ananiambia bado nipande. Juu nimesha natoka juu. Nimeenda juu na nikarudi. Bado ni wengi wa kutumia.
Tunaongea na watu wa hii area. Wanalalamika sana. Hata watoto wanafuta bangi. Na nikafuatilia hii bagi inatoka wapi. Juu hata juzi kuna mwingine tulishika, na hata tulipomshika na akaacha kuuza, bado bagi iko. Ndio tulifuatilia. Na wale watu wanafanya kazi ya kuchunga mifugo hapa, ndio walinipea hiyo tip off.
All right, so this morning it's a discussion about the use and legalization of marijuana in Kenya, and on a Twitter poll we had asked you whether you think the growing and use of marijuana should be legalized. Do you think the growing and use of marijuana should be legalized in Kenya? Continue giving us your feedback on a social media platform at KTN News, my Twitter handle at ZedaBrenda, begin with the hashtag KTN News Center. So much of your feedback, so many of you agreeing with the use and legalization of marijuana in the country. A few of you just saying no and majority of you saying yes. And continue giving us your feedback whether the use of marijuana should be legalized in Kenya. So it is a conversation that this morning we are having with Simon Morra, scientist. He's one of the petitioners when it comes to the use and legalization of marijuana in Kenya. And of course, from a city center studio, we have Professor Lincoln Halasaka, Hasakala, I beg your pardon, and he is a clinical psychologist and a lecturer at the University of Nairobi. And before we begin with Mr. Simon Morra, who is a scientist, I'd like us to begin with Professor Lincoln Hasakala, who's joining us from a city center studio. Prof, what is your take on the use of marijuana? Should it be legalized in Kenya? Professor Lincoln Hasakala is a clinical psychologist at the University of Nairobi, joining us from a city center studio just to give us his mindset. Prof, if you can hear me now, a Twitter poll question this morning is whether Kenyans what do they think about the use and legalization of marijuana in Kenya? Do you think it should be legalized?
My take on this topic is that as Kenyans, we need to approach it very carefully, because marijuana as it is a neurochemical, that is one of the psychoactive substances that we have around. And as a practitioner in mental health in this country, one of the biggest burden in the family is substance use, and marijuana is one of the biggest problem, because marijuana as it is, we are seeing in research, is one of the gateway drugs, particularly starting in adolescence. And we know that the brain has its own endocannabinoids, which takes place, rapid growth in the brain at that stage. And if you look at most people who are using marijuana now, it is starting in adolescence. And a practitioner in mental health, we are seeing that if you've dealt with one client who has substance use, and there are many now, you wouldn't want any youth to be involved in the use of marijuana, because it interferes with the brain development. And in science, we call it, the biggest area is the neurocognitive development, which is totally interfered with marijuana use. And most of our youth start at that stage. The other big problem we are seeing is it interferes with psychosocial development. And again, this impacts negatively on people who are still growing. So as we put this debate across, my take will be, let's look at the burden of disease, particularly in youth who are using this marijuana, and find out, are there the medical benefits versus the burden of disease that the families are going to face. And as a Kenyan, having practiced, and I teach this area of mental health issues, I'll be very careful as I watch this debate. The other thing is that we know that marijuana in this country has been put as an illicit drug as Schedule 1. Again, we want to look at our four policymakers. When they put this as Schedule 1, what were the biggest issue that they faced that we put this drug as illicit? And then we put this debate across, understanding the brain development and the big issues that will face families and how to manage these disorders, because currently for practitioners in mental health, substance use is one of the biggest burden. And we know that mental health management in this country is still, I'd call it at infancy, and we are seeing big problems, particularly coming from marijuana use as a gateway drug.
All right, thank you so much, Professor Sakala. And Prof, let me just bring in one of the petitioners, Simon Morra. And you've heard what Prof has said. He's not in support at all, because he says it will have a lot of mental effects should it be legalized. But you, as a petitioner, you're one of the petitioners, you're saying that it has herbal and medicinal extracts.
Yes, that's correct, yes. Now, first, we should look at marijuana as one of the plants that we do have here in Kenya and anywhere else. Secondly, it is a carbohydrate, classified as a carbohydrate. That means it has CH and O. It has a carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, which is classified like maize cob, beans, or whatever. But now the thing is, and the biggest problem that has been facing the use of marijuana, unclassified as an illicit drug or narcotic drug, is because of the chemical component that is in the marijuana, which is also found in all the other carbohydrate materials. Let's take, for example, sugarcane, whereby we get ethanol, that's ethyl alcohol or methyl alcohol out of it. Now, if you take the chemical composition of marijuana, is a CH3OH. That is, we have a component of methyl and a hydroxide compound. Now, if that is taken in form of smoke or in form of puff, we do have that effect of methanol intake into our body. Now, our body is built in such a way that our brain has a protector, immediately senses the intake of methanol. It blocks further intake. It limits the intake of methanol, methyl alcohol, which is actually the component in marijuana. Marijuana has a CH3 and OH. That is basically a formulation of methanol, that's or methyl alcohol.
So how do you separate these components in such a way that you don't have what Prof was saying, mental effects, but we just remain with the medicinal part of it?
That's what I'm coming to. Now, what we do as what I've done is, I've removed the methyl component, that is the psychotropic component, out of the entire process, whereby now it leaves marijuana as a food supplement, retaining all the medicinal value out of it, and then having it as a food supplement that anybody can take as from as young as 6 months and above up to whatever age. So what we have done, or what I've done on behalf of HIAQUIP, is that I have removed the psychotropic component out of the entire process. So it leaves it as a food supplement. And that's why when it was taken to the government chemist, the government chemist was not able to be able to determine, it was not there. So the issue of it being that it would cause brain harm or health harm, it was not there.
Okay, let me just bring Prof into this conversation. Prof, you've heard what Mr. Morra has said, removing the psychotropic component.
Yeah.
How realistic is that? So that we only remain with the medicinal part of it?
Looking at the marijuana use in this country, it's mainly smoked, and that's where the harm is, because that goes directly to the brain. So how we are going to now start removing including the psychoactive component, which is quite harmful to the development of the brain, to the public is going to be a problem, because the marijuana use across the globe is the smoking. And the active component of it, which is quite destructive on the brain development and brain function, is the main issue that we need to look at. So it is okay to say we are going to manufacture and have a safe product, which we know the ICT has those medical benefits. But the biggest problem we have is that it is our youth, our adolescents, that we are going to put at risk, because marijuana as it is smoked. And that is the entry of the clinical mental health serious issues that we are facing as practitioners in this country. So we need to look at that, and how are we going to change that public view that I'm going to buy a tablet which is synthesized, removed the psychoactive, when actually the immediate effect of marijuana, as we know it, it makes somebody euphoric. So will I go and pick substance that does not make me feel euphoric on the counter, or do I buy just the rolls that makes me feel euphoric immediately and eventually destroy my brain? So those are some of the serious issues I think we need to look at. Not to say that we are going to synthesize and produce the positive effects of marijuana, because currently the biggest problem from marijuana use in the country is the smoking.
Okay.
And we need to look at that and find out how we go to manage smoking of marijuana from young people, since it is now becoming the entry drug, particularly for drug users in this country, which is a big problem that the mental health issue is facing. And any psychiatrists or clinical psychologists, if you walk in their offices, you have a severe case of marijuana use which has interfered with the development of that youth. And that would be my point of focus, not looking at the other prescribed medication from synthesis of marijuana, because that is another big process. The moment we legalize, then it means that we are going to lose our youth into drugs.
All right. You've heard what Prof has said, raising very pertinent questions there. Just how will we separate the medicinal part and the abuse of marijuana as a drug? But before I get your thoughts on that, I'd like us to look at another Super Bowl concerning the attempts to legalize marijuana in the country. There have been several attempts, and of course, right on the Super Bowl, you have it right there. We have Okoth Gwada. He's actually the first person to petition the Senate Health Committee, and he was seeking legalization of marijuana, saying the plant can cure up to 6,077 medical conditions. And of course, when he presented his petition to the Senate Health Committee, he's saying that marijuana has not only huge medicinal benefits, but also massive industrial use. Now, just to remind you that when he was presenting his petition to the Senate last year in February, Okoth started an online petition for the legalization of weed. He had actually collected about 5,000 signatures, and he needed 7,500 signatures for the petition to be tabled in Parliament for debate. The other petitioner is none other than Simon Morra, who's talking to us in a studio this morning. And Simon petitioned Parliament, and he said that Kenya can actually gain 1.5 trillion in foreign exchange. That's a lot of money. should we legalize the use of marijuana in the country? And of course, he says that cigarettes are more harmful than the use of marijuana. He was arguing that he found a way to separate the plant's psychotropic elements, therefore making it safe for consumption by all, something that Professor Lincoln Hasakala has actually argued out, saying, no, this cannot happen. It will be very hard for us to differentiate between the medicinal part and the abuse of marijuana. And lastly, Mr. Morra said that he had conducted research on marijuana and Mira, which is in English known as cat, before coming up with his findings. And he further revealed that he came up with the formula in 1996. So he petitioned Parliament in March 2018, this year, but he came up with the formula in 1996, and it had been confirmed by the government chemist. He will substantiate for us that. Now, those are some of the attempts to legalize marijuana. We had Okoth Gwanda, and of course now we have Simon Morra, and the latest person also to support the use and legalization of marijuana in the country is none other than Kibra, Member of Parliament, Ken Okoth. We've looked at the several attempts to legalize bang in the country. But it brings the question back to what Professor Kasakala was saying. It will be very hard to, once we legalize it, to differentiate it, because so many people now will take advantage of that and start abusing marijuana in the country.
Well, what I would say is, first, we do not support the smoking of marijuana. Smoking of marijuana simply means burning down the chemical composition of marijuana, which is basically methanol, if it's found to clarify in the simplest language. The chemical formulation of methanol, that's methyl alcohol, is CH3OH. And that's what we're removing, which of course now is the caffeine part of it. And the caffeine part of it is also available in Arabica coffee in very high proportions. Mm-hmm. Now, all what the government is supposed to do is legalize it as a cash crop, like any other cash crop. Control it in such a way that the farmer is has the full responsibility of controlling it, mm-hmm. that nobody access it for smoking, mm-hmm. because that's what smoking is what really causes a lot of problem, because individuals would go for it, buy it at mm-hmm. a very cheaper price. But now, for the last 4,000 years, marijuana has never caused any casualty, mm-hmm. because one needs to smoke about 40,000 sticks of marijuana to have a fatal mm-hmm.
Incident.
Now, in this case, these individuals, whoever they smoke one stick or two sticks. They get high in 15 minutes, lasts for 3 hours, it disappears. Mm-hmm. Now, for this person to keep on feeling high because of that psychotropic effect, this guy keeps on, or whoever, these individuals, keeps on smoking it. Now, it will be very simple for this guy to go into a bar, buy a tot mm-hmm. of brandy or whiskey, and then the whole problem is gone. But now you see, a tot of whiskey goes for about 100 shillings to 200 shillings. Now, this individual has 20 shillings. So all what this guy will need is the 20 shillings for him to come high. Mm-hmm. And he's doing so, or she's doing so, because he wants to overcome a certain obstacles in his life. Mm-hmm. Now, what we are saying is, if the same individual is taught that marijuana is a cash crop, mm-hmm. it has this value, and our estimate is that 1 acre would generate about 10 million. So, if instead of smoking it, this individual would take a piece of land from his father or whoever, get a piece of land which is plant an acre, which we estimate that it will regenerate about a ton. If that's 1,000 kilos, you multiply by $100, mm-hmm. it's about $100,000 mm-hmm. comes to 10 million.
Okay.
Now, the thing here, what Professor would really want, or any other Kenyan would want us to understand is, we are growing it as a commercial cash crop, controlled, mm-hmm. the way tea, coffee was controlled in the early 50s, mm-hmm. and then what is supposed to happen is that the farmer that has been granted the permit to grow it takes full responsibility that no smoking is allowed.
Okay.
Yeah.
The farmer who has